Hey, what's up people, it is Reaper here, and today we're coming in with a review of Loki Season 2. So first off, I just wanted to say that this video is going to contain full spoilers for Season 2 of Loki, as well as Season 1, so if you guys haven't watched either of those, or maybe you've seen one but not the other, save this video to your watch later and come back and watch it after you've watched them. So starting off with some of the things I liked about the show, first and foremost, Mobius. I love this character so much. Owen Wilson is a very talented actor, and I really hope that this isn't the last we see of him, though I have a suspicion that this might be, because I think that this is going to be the last season of Loki, and I really don't know what they could do with those characters beyond this point. That being said, you never know. With the multiverse open, they could do a lot with Mobius. They could have different versions of him come in, so hopefully this isn't the last we see of him, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Another thing I really liked about this season is I feel that a lot of the side characters were given more depth. Some examples of that would be when you get to see what the original lives of these variants were like. B-15 was a doctor, Casey was a escaped convict from Alcatraz, Mobius was a Ski-Doo salesman, I guess, which I thought was pretty funny. He's kind of got this mundane life. And I also just felt that the side characters had a lot more screen time this season. Obviously, Loki's still the main character, but in Season 1 it seemed to focus a lot more on Loki as well as Sylvie, whereas in this season I feel that everybody gets an equal share of screen time. I also really love the introduction of OB. He may be one of my favorite characters on the show. He's a runner-up for Mobius. And then I also like seeing the Kang variant known as Victor Timely. I really liked his timid nature, and he's not very much like the other Kangs that we've seen so far. I'm not sure how they're going to use him in the future. It might be just like the others that I predicted earlier, that they're not going to use him again. But if they did, I think that'd be pretty cool. Another thing I like seeing was more of what they did in the first season, or at least the end of the first season, where Loki and Sylvie has this debate about should the multiverse be allowed to open or should it be closed off to the sacred timeline. There's a lot of cool concepts that tie into free will and them playing God, and there's a lot of cool conceptual arguments between the two, especially in the finale episode of the season, which I'll go into later on. Speaking of Sylvie, I love how the timeline she decided to settle on was her working at McDonald's. I thought that was absolutely hilarious. And it really shows that her character really just enjoys the simple parts of life. She grew up always living in apocalypses and trying to survive the TVA trying to purge her all the time. So it kind of makes sense that she would be fulfilled with such a normal life of working at a McDonald's. I also really love the episode, I believe it's episode 3, where they go back to old-timey Chicago. I really love the setting of that, and that's one of my favorite parts of the show, is when they do the time travel and they have these settings that are in the past like that. Another good setting was the episode all about the actor. I forgot the dude's name, but he was the guy who wanted to leave the TVA so he could pursue his life as the actor in that old-timey era. But yeah, those are some of the things that stuck out to me as being really good in the season, but now let's get into some of the negatives, and I gotta say there's a lot more negatives that I found while watching the show than positives. The first off being, even though I liked the time periods that they gave us with the 80s McDonald's and the old-timey Chicago, and as well as that one part with the actor, but I just felt like there wasn't enough of that in the season. Like Sylvie's world of being in like the 1980s McDonald's kind of world, I felt it wasn't explored enough. There was a cool scene where she was in a record shop, but that was short-lived. And overall, in a show that's all focused on time travel, I felt that they didn't do quite enough of it in this season to really satisfy me here. Most of the show was spent inside the TVA, and while I understand why they did that for a narrative standpoint, it just feels a little boring and stale when that's like the setting that the show focuses on. And some of my main gripes with the show were just the confusion of it all. Now, maybe it's just me, but I don't think that it is, because when it comes to shows like this, especially ones that deal with weird concepts like multiverse and time travel, I'm usually tracking what they're putting down, even if it's like some fake comic book made up science. I still grasp it enough to not really mind it, but with this show, it just felt like they were doing too much, and I didn't really understand a lot of it, and I'll get into some of those. One of the things that really confused me was why a different version of Loki killed himself in episode 4. I don't think they ever elaborated or said why that happened. It just kind of happened. Also, to my understanding, they never really explained why Loki started time slipping, and it happened twice. Both of those times were just at random points where it felt like the plot needed it, but they didn't really do too much explaining as to why or how it's happening. In the first episode of the season, Loki starts time slipping after the events of what happens with He Who Remains, but if it was because of that, then why does Sylvie not time slip? Also, they seem to have fixed it in the first episode, and then it just randomly happens again in episode 4. Like, how did that come about? That's kind of a recurring theme for this show, I feel, is they just do a lot of stuff and don't really explain it to its full extent. And I also didn't like the parts where OB keeps insisting that it's like a fiction problem. Like, I feel like that's such a lazy explanation. You can't just chalk something up to it being fiction. I get that it's a fictional show with a fictional setting and fictional concepts, but doing things like that really break immersion for me, and it kind of just lessens the value of the show. Another thing that really ticked me off through this whole season was they never once mentioned or did anything with Sylvie and Loki's relationship. Now, I do think it was a little weird to have Loki fall in love with another version of himself. It's pretty narcissistic, but to be honest, it fits really well with Loki's character. That being said, even though I found it a little weird, they can't just not do anything with it, right? Like, they set it up in this first season, and then they just never talk about it again. There was like one casual mention in the finale of it, and it just never gets talked about. And sure, maybe the two aren't in love or don't like each other anymore after what happened with their debate at the end of season 1, but that's something that, again, they didn't even bring up or mention. It kind of just felt like they were running out of time and wanted to cram a bunch into a 6-episode series, so they just cut that plot line and chucked it to the wayside and had us forget about it. Another thing that ticked me off was when they were trying to fix the time loom, how did 3 super geniuses, that being OB, Victor Timely, and Loki, once he educates himself about the physics of it all, how did none of them account for the fact that the multiverse was going to keep expanding infinitely, and there's just no way to account for that? It's something that I kept having in the back of my head while they were trying to fix the loom. They were trying to increase its durability, I guess you could say, and its capacity to fit all these new timelines, but I kept thinking, well, if the multiverse is infinite, then how can they possibly account for that? And I kept thinking, oh, well, maybe they'll just throw some comic book logic in there and fix it that way, and it'll all be good. But then they reveal that even after they finally fixed the loom, that, oh, you can't scale it for infinity. How did 3 people who are insanely smart never once think of that? Another thing I didn't really like was how was Loki strong enough to withstand all the temporal energy without wearing the costume, the little weird scuba diver looking thing? Like, I get that Loki's a god and therefore he's more powerful than the average person, but he's also not invincible. We saw him die from Thanos choking him out. So if Thanos can choke him out, then my guess is that a multiverse worth of temporal energy would wipe him out instantaneously. Another thing I didn't quite understand was how Loki had enough power to kickstart an entire dead multiverse and hold it together. Once again, I understand he's a god and he's a super powerful being, but you're telling me he has enough power to jumpstart an entire multiverse and keep it going forever? I don't know, I'm just not really buying that. Also, the ending to this show didn't really give me much satisfaction. I'm a little sad Loki never got to reunite with Thor and the rest of the cast, and also I feel it didn't give the side characters a proper enough ending. I also don't understand why the TVA is still running. If the loom's down, and if their goal isn't to purge timelines anymore, then what exactly is their purpose? Why did everybody not return to their old lives? I know Mobius kind of did at the end, and Sylvie said she was going to go do her own thing, but you also see people like OB writing a new TVA handbook, and I'm just wondering what the purpose of that is. Maybe they'll get into this at some point, but I highly doubt it. I do think that this is going to be the end of Loki, and potentially the last we see of the TVA. But despite those negatives and a lot of the confusion that comes with the show, I did still enjoy it. Overall, I'd have to give it a 6.5 out of 10. It was good, but it wasn't amazing, and season 1 was by far like the best show that Marvel's done. So to see the show go from that great first season to this is a little disappointing. That being said, I still think that the character development and the characters being interesting is still there, and that's why I'd still consider the show to be good. You kind of just have to turn your brain off a little bit when it comes to the logic of everything that goes into it. But with that being said, I am going to end the video here. If you guys enjoyed the video, please hit the like button as it truly does help my channel grow. If you want to see more in the future, hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you guys are always alerted whenever I upload more. And now I want to know what you guys think. Did you guys like season 2? Did you hate it? Are you in the middle about it? Do you agree with my opinions? Do you disagree? Let me know all of your opinions in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.